get started. In Unit 5, and we will spend 2 lectures talk about the renal systems, how they work, and what their job. And then the last 2 lectures, we will cover the integrative physiology. We will use all the systems we learned in this semester, how they integrate together to maintain your pH balance, maintain your osmolarity, maintain your salt balance. So that's the integrative physiology. So in the renal systems, we mainly focus on this guy, the kidney. And spend a lot of time talk about the kidney's function. So this slide lists all the functions we will cover in these 2 lectures, the kidney function. And the kidney filter your blood. The filtration rate is called the GFR, glomerular filtration rate. When you do your annual health check, and there's one column saying your GFR equals to something, and that's represent your kidney function. So your kidney is your filter your blood. And the GFR represent the kidney's function, how they filter your blood, how much they filter. And in this class, we will also learn how to calculate your GFR. So you know how to use your blood sample, use the urine sample, and use your urine flow. That's how much urine you produce per day. And we can estimate that based on your body weight. And we use all these 3 to calculate back what's your correct GFR. So that's when you do your annual health check, why the clinic can use your blood sample, your urine sample to calculate your GFR, give you estimation how your kidney work. And in the renal system, this is the main organ we're going to focus on talking about. So we're going to spend 95% of the time talk about the kidney's function. So the kidney is a filter. It filters your blood. And it turned out a lot of people need kidney. So every organ you have in the body have a price. The black market has a price. And the price is not really depends on their function. It's all based on the supply and demand. So you say the most important organ, or the brain. On the black market, nobody wants to buy the brain because nobody needs a brain. So the most expensive organ in the black market, kidney. It's like a lot of people need to have kidney. That's the most important one, not the heart, even though you feel the heart is the most important organ in the body. It's all based on the supply and demand. And we have 2 kidneys. Their locations, you put 2 hands on your waist. That's where your 2 kidneys are. So they're pretty high, pretty posterior. They're right next to your spine. So when you put your 2 hands on your waist, that's you'll find your 2 kidneys. And also there's the place you have the floating ribs. So the ribs not connected to the sternum is called the floating ribs right there. So you found those boxers that will hit. They usually don't hit the front because most boxers have 6 packs. They can hit. So they don't hit here, they will hit the side. They'll hit here. And when they hit that place, they can break the floating ribs, and the floating ribs can go in to puncture the kidney, make the situation worse. So they hit this. There's the kidney. And those 2 kidneys, technically you only need 1. So you can donate 1 to the other people, to your loved one, or you can save it just in case you need 1. Or you can sell 1. Yeah, technically you can because you only need 1 kidney. I do not recommend that because we actually had news, say 10 years ago. 10 years ago, that's the times the iPhone 4 was the hot toy. iPhone 4 is legend. It's like, I have iPhone 4 for 7 years, never break, throw it. And my kids throw it, still there. I have to replace the phone eventually when the battery dies. So, and it's pretty expensive about 10 years ago. And a young guy in China, he wanted to have iPhone 4, but he could not afford it. So he decided to sell 1 kidney to buy the iPhone 4. But it's in the news. But those companies are willing, those hospitals are willing to perform the surgery, are not a very big hospital. So he has a lot of problems after the surgery. He had kidney infections and other infections. And after 10 years, nobody wants iPhone 4 now. But he needs a new kidney. So it's not worth it. Save 1 or donate. Those hospitals are willing to perform the kidney donation, not big hospitals. So this slide shows you all the function of the kidney. Its main functions is produce urine. And you found your urines, well, in your past 20 years of your life in this world, you found sometimes your urine is very concentrated, like iced tea, and sometimes it's very, very diluted, almost like pure water. So your kidney, based on your body need, you can decide to conserve some water so your urine become very concentrated or let more water go. So its function is regulate your body volume and body osmolarity. But in your urine, you also put some hydrogen inside. Your kidney also help to maintain pH. For the people with the lung disease, like a lot of lung disease we covered in Unit 4. Those people, their bodies become too acidic because their lung could not get enough CO2 out. The kidney will take over. So the kidney will dump those hydrogens into the urine. So you can imagine those patients, they have respiratory acidosis because their body pH is too low, too acidic. Their kidney will work, and you can imagine their urine will be very acidic, more acidic than normal. They dump more hydrogen into it, and eventually their blood pH, if you take the blood pH, amazingly pH is still normal, still between 7.4. The kidney just work harder. So these are the function of the kidney, expected one. They also have some unexpected one. Like your kidney is an endocrine organ, produce renal. Renal is an important hormone, not because renal's function. Renals don't do much function in the body, but renal will trigger other two important hormones to release. It's called the RAS pathway. We will talk about it next week. Renal will trigger angiotensin. Angiotensin will trigger aldosterone release. So angiotensin, very important hormone in the body. Aldosterone, also important hormone, regulates sodium reabsorption. And we take sodium back, water follows. So it can also help maintain your body volume as well. And RAS pathway is a very important pathway in your body. Like if you take this class to help you to prepare for MCAT, pretty much every year you take the MCAT, they'll ask you something about RAS. Similar for the nursing license, they'll ask you the RAS. I think they feel like if you can master the renal system, you can master all the other systems, which is ask a lot of questions about the renal system. So endocrine organ also store glycogens, convert to glucose. That's the kidney's function. And you know, I like to use analogy. In the cardiovascular system, I ask you to think your cardiovascular system like the pumps and the pipes. In the renal system, I ask you to think your renal system function like this. Not the fish tank, that's your body. Not the water is your blood. It's this small one, the filter, that's your kidney function. So your kidney just filter your blood, it constantly running, filter your blood. And when you have this big fish tank, you will go to the pet store, purchase the biggest pump you can purchase, so they can clean, they can have a big flow called the GFR, glomerular filtration rate. Big flow, so you can filter your water pretty well, so your water is clean. If you have budget, you purchase the smallest pump you can purchase, and you look at it running, you run so slow, it looks so pathetic. It's not just look depressing. You also, when you run so slow, you found after 1 week, 2 weeks, the water gets dirtier and dirtier. That's what happens when people have kidney failure. Their filtration rate is so slow. So eventually you have to manually clean those water. Eventually you have to send those blood out, use the external machine, clean those blood, and send the clean blood back. What's that? What's that process? Send blood out, clean, send back. What's that? That's dialysis. You found in the 21st century, Americans, we have a lot of people need dialysis. And it's a business, it become a business. It just help people do dialysis because we have so many people have kidney failure. It doesn't need to completely fail. You just say, well, your kidney functions is supposed to be a big filter, it turned into a smaller one. It won't be able to handle those clean functions of this. And then this person needs dialysis. And it can be once a week, can be twice a week, can be once per day. Depends on how much function their filters still have left. And if it's once a day, pretty much it ruins their life because it's not a very pleasant experience. I had students, she needed to do dialysis, and she told me it's not a very pleasant experience because your blood is your body temperature. It's 98.6 Fahrenheit. So when your blood flow out, it's like I suck the heat away from the body. So she has to put 3 blankets on. She is still shivering during dialysis. It's not a very pleasant experience. You're not looking forward to it. So take good care of your kidney. And because of that, so a lot of people need a new kidney. So the kidney becomes a high price in the black market. Let's look at your renal system. So you found you have a kidney stone, and this stone, the pathways tell you the kidneys, the renal system's components. Pretty straightforward. The kidney, the ureter, the bladder, the urethra. That's it, all these 4 components. So in the renal systems, the most important one, kidney. You have 2. So protect them well. It's 2 kidney. They're right next to your spine. And we can spend 95% of the time talk about their function. They're the filter. And after they filter your blood, the waste particle become urine. So the urine need to go to the bladder, and you have a pipe called ureter connect the kidney to the bladder. Because your kidneys are very high. They're in the abdominal cavity, posterior part, pretty high area, just inferior to your diaphragm. And your bladder is pretty low. Your bladder is in your pelvic cavity, so you need the urethra connect them together. And the ureter, and urethra just, well, when you have to pee, just go through the bladder and come out. And these 2 structures above the kidney is called the adrenal gland. They are endocrine glands. They are not renal system. It's 2 adrenal glands. They are very important glands. They are the steroid hormones glands. Most of your body hormone are peptide hormone. Adrenal glands, steroid hormones. adrenal cortex, they release 3 steroid hormones. Your cortisol, stress hormones. Aldosterone, that's the hormone we will talk about in next week. The hormone regulates sodium reabsorption. And androgen, the male sex hormone, is 3 from the adrenal cortex. Adrenal medulla, we also talk about in unit 2. Adrenal medulla is the modified sympathetic gland. So it turned out that we all need adrenal glands. In animal study, when they get rid of the adrenal gland, rat will die in 24 hours. You need the adrenal glands, but they're endocrine organ. They just happen to be above the kidney. So the renal system only needs 4. And the kidneys are the filter. They filter your blood. And when you have filter at home, or you check those filters, they get dirty. And if you have those filters to filter your water, sometimes you have stone. Similar here. Some people just have kidney stones. And most kidney stones, when you have them, you're not aware of them. When they become too small, just pee them out. But for some reasons, some people, their kidney stones grow, become bigger and bigger. And we can have a kidney stone this big, 1 centimeter or bigger. It's called a stone. It's not a marble. It's razor sharp. Do we have anyone have kidney stone? No? Okay. Sometimes I do. And the student told me it's like a blade cut inside your body. So it starts from the kidney, goes to the ureter. It's like a blade all cut down from the abdominal cavity to the pelvic cavity. And to the bladder, it will cut through the urethra out because they're razor sharp. And I read the news a few years ago, say a guy, he went to the hospital, he visited his friend, and suddenly he had a kidney stone. And he couldn't even walk to ask for help. He has to call 911. He said, where are you? I'm in the hospital. And they said, why you call us? Because he could not walk to find help. They have to call them, ask them to come to help. That's how painful the kidney stone is. So drink enough water. Drink enough water. You need water. But not too much. Don't drink 2 liters water per 10 minutes. You learn that in unit 1, homeostasis. So let's quickly look at the kidney's function. When you cut the kidney open, and the outside is called the cortex, the inside is called the medulla. Medulla looks darker. And this small tube is called a nephron. Actually, this is too big. Nephrons are pretty small. Each kidney has millions of nephrons. We call them functional units because they serve exactly the same function as the kidney. They filter your blood. So when this person's kidney could not function too well, or this person's kidney function pretty well, is we look at what percentage of the nephrons still have function. If this person have 95% of the nephrons still functioning well, the filtration rate will be pretty high. It's like a big filter you purchase on your fish tank. And if these persons only have 20% nephron functions, the filtration rate will be low. So that's the nephron. And the blood will go to, from the renal artery, and eventually will go to those nephrons. And when they've been processed like this tube, eventually it will go to the end part of this tube. From this tube, it will go to the renal pelvis. Once they go to the renal pelvis, we call them urine. It's not blood anymore, it's done. So you could not take the urine back. But it starts from the blood, the plasma, and once it goes through the whole tube, it becomes urine. And once it goes to the renal pelvis, that's the urine. It will go to the bladder. So you could not take it back. So a lot of process happen in the nephron. So nephrons, pretty busy place. They use a lot of ATP. They do a lot of reabsorption, use those membrane proteins to take important molecules back. So we will spend a lot of time talk about the nephron. We use the nephron to represent the kidney function. See what's going on inside those nephrons. And the bloods come from the heart. From the heart, go to the aorta, go to the arteries, and go to the renal artery. So renal artery will send blood there to the kidney. And in anatomy, you will learn those arteries' names. Like each one has a name, they gradually branch out. And in physiology, we focus more on the function. So you know the first one is called the renal artery, and the last one is called the efferent arteriole. In the next few slides, you will see these two. You will see the efferent arteriole. So these are the only two you need to know, those arteries. And when they go to those tiny ones, like these are the efferent arteriole, will send blood to the nephron. A nephron will process it, and those clean blood, actually over 99% of them will go back. Will go through those blue small pipes called the, through those venules, and go back to the vein, renal vein, and go back to the circulation. So over 99% of them will go through the renal vein and go back. So we call them clean blood, they've been cleaned. And less than 1% will go to the renal pelvis, the one hidden behind this yellow pipe, and will go to the bladder and then become the urine. So that's the kidney's function. Now let's look at the flow. In unit 3, I emphasized several times, the blood flow need to be consistent. Your left pump, your right pump, even though the right pump is a small one, the cardio output from the right pump and the left pump, they're exactly the same because it's a closed circle. So the blood go to the right pump, 5 liters per minute, and go to the lung and go back to the left side, left ventricle, send out still 5 liters per minute. It's a closed circle. And those 5-liter blood will diverge out to different organs, like your brain, O unit 2, we focus on the brain. Here, the textbooks say about 14% of blood, and new information, new knowledge say it can go to 15 to 20%. It can go to 20% of blood flow, go to the brain. So your brain uses a lot of blood. A small percentage will go to the heart. It's called the coronary circulation. We did not emphasize this circulation too much in Unit 3 because it's mainly anatomy. So that circulation just provides, it's like a small circulations and provide the blood flow to the whole heart. We focus more on the heart's function in Unit 3. And that circulations, if those coronary arteries been blocked, that's heart attack. So they have to use the stent, extend those coronary artery. But more research says if you do the stent or use the balloon to clean those clots, it's like it increases the damage. There's more likely the patient after a few years, they're gonna have another heart attack. There's some research about it. This is in the coronary artery. We won't go deeper in that part. And sometimes they have to do the bypass still in this part. The liver, let's look at the liver. Actually, 27% or 30% of blood goes to the liver. What's the liver's function? Liver has more than 200 functions. If you don't have liver, you die. You say, well, why the liver does not have a higher price than the kidney? The answer is liver have very good regeneration rate. So the liver donor, they will cut 50% of the liver. And then that liver is also the biggest organ you have in the abdominal cavity. So they will cut 50% of liver, and they can cut that 50% liver to 3 or 4, give to 3 or 4 people. So it turned out people, and they will grow back to 1 liver. That's pretty amazing. So, and the kidney, you cannot cut it. You can say, okay, I cut 50%. You have to use the whole kidney. So kidney is more expensive. The liver's function similar to the kidney, but not filter. It's called a detoxify. You have a lot of enzymes in the kidney, get rid of the toxic molecule. So the blood from your small intestines, after you eat a big meal, your small intestines absorb those nutrients and goes to the capillary in the small intestines. They will go to the liver first. Liver will detoxify those toxic molecules, and those clean blood will go back to your circulation. And your liver consider alcohol you drink, consider alcohol a toxic molecule. So they also have the enzyme called ethanol dehydrogenase. That's the enzyme's name to get rid of the alcohol. So how much alcohol your body can tolerate? Next week, Thanksgiving. You gonna drink? 21? No. Do you drink? It's mine. Okay, I want to small. Yes, how much alcohol your body can tolerate depends on the liver. Some people have more enzymes, they can drink more. Other people like me, I don't have too much enzymes, so I could not drink too much alcohol. It just depends on the liver. It will get rid of the toxic molecule. So those chronic drinker, you found the damage the liver. So that's the organ for detoxify. Also detoxifies toxic molecules. When you take a lot of medicines, you increase the workload of the liver because they're supposed to get rid of toxic molecule. Now let's look at the kidney. The kidneys, 1 liter per minute. That's 20%. That's a lot. Given the size of the kidney is about your fist. You hold your fist a little bit smaller. That's your kidney. And 20% of blood goes there. So that's the renal blood flow. 20% of blood goes there. And those blood will go to the renal artery and go through the efferent arteriole. Through the efferent arteriole was sent to the nephron. So after the efferent arteriole, you have a capillary. And those capillary form like a bowl structure called the glomerulus. So you do your annual health check. They have the glomerular filtration rate, GFR. Right? So apparently filtrations happens here, glomerulus. So those filtrations, the blood plasma go from the glomerulus into the nephron. That's filtration. And after the blood's been filtered into the nephron, it will go through the whole tube. And if nothing happens, eventually it will go to the renal pelvis, go to the bladder, become the urine. And over 99% of the blood need to be taken back. Because if you don't, you run out of blood. You have about 5 liters of blood, and the kidney filter, they can filter 180 liters of blood per day. So if they don't take those clean bloods back, after about 30 minutes, you run out of blood. So they need to take it back. And when we look at the nephron's function, okay, this one is they get rid of the capillary, make it look cleaner. We actually have 2 kinds of nephron. I won't talk about the difference. Yeah, you learn them in anatomy. We use this one. The ones have a long loop. One has a short loop, the other has a long loop. The long loop want to represent the nephron's function. This is more standardized one. So their head is in the cortical part, in the cortex, and their loop, this loop will go deep into the medulla. So this nephron. And the bloods go from the efferent arterioles, go to the glomerulus, will be filtered into the nephrons. And eventually when they go to the end part of the nephron, they become urine. So over 99% of the liquid important molecules, they need to be reabsorbed back. And we'll talk more about it next week when we talk about the reabsorption process. In this area, the medulla areas, they actually make the osmolarity higher. So compared with the cortex, this is the cortex, this is medulla. the medulla areas, they have high osmolarity because high osmolarity, water feel like it's their job to do to dilute the high osmolarity. They help the water move out. But if the water move out, they stay here, they dilute the medulla. Well, that's a problem because next time when the water comes, they're less likely to go out. So they could not make the water stay in the medulla. That's why when the water move out, you need to have a capillary quickly take them away to the circulation. So that's this peritubular capillary. So this looks complicated. No, it's actually a capillary network. It just covers the whole nephron, called the peritubular capillary. Its job is just to take whatever come out of the nephron and go back to the blood circulation. So it won't stay in the medulla and mess up the osmolarity. So when you take those water back, when you take sodium back, take glucose back, it won't stay in the medulla, mess up the osmolarity. So it will go back to your circulation. That's the peritubular capillary. It's just you put these two together, it looks very complicated. But basically, it's just one capillary called the glomerulus, and then you have a second capillary called the peritubular capillary. And especially the ones surround the loop area, it's called the vasa recta. Vasa recta is just part of the capillary. And that's it, just two capillaries. But when we look at the capillary network, it's still a little bit abnormal. Let's look at the capillary. So the blood go from the afferent arteriole, it go to the first capillary, it's called the glomerulus. Okay, we learned that. And then you need to go to another capillary called the peritubular capillary. And between them, you have the efferent arteriole connected. Okay, so you learned in the cardiovascular system, you have the arteriole go to the capillary, it's supposed to go to the venule, and go to the vein, go to vena cava. You have a capillary connect with another capillary. That's not normal. So we call this portal system. This is the renal portal system. A capillary connect with another capillary. In the body, we have three portal systems. The first one, we talk about it in unit 1. It's called a hypophyseal portal system. Stay between the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland. Its function is to send the trophic hormone from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland to trigger another trophic hormone release. And this is the second portal system called the renal portal system. Its function is filter your blood filtration and reabsorption, the second capillary. It takes those nutrients from those tubes. So after the glomerulus, those plasma being filtered out, it will go to the tube because you found the head of the nephron completely cover the glomerulus. So the bloods have nowhere to go, those liquid. Once they filtered out, they're in the tube already. So that process is called the filtration. It will go through this yellow pipe, and then it turns to those pink pipe, and go to the end. When they go to the end part, that's urine. So a lot of things happen inside those pipes. A lot of molecules need to be taken back. So when they be taken back, they will be transported by the peritubular capillary and move back to your circulation. So that process is called the reabsorption. So that's the renal portal system. The third portal systems, we don't talk about in this class. The portal system is between the capillary in the small intestine. So that's a big capillary because your small intestine is 7 meters long. So all the nutrients your small intestines absorb will go to the capillary. And the capillary will lead those bloods to your liver, It's called hepatic portal system. That's the third one. Your liver will clean, detoxify those toxic molecules. And then those clean blood will go back to your circulation. So your body only has 3 portal systems. A capillary connects with another capillary. So now we get rid of those capillary. We can look at the nephron. This is nephron. It looks cleaner. So the bloods come from the afferent arteriole, go to the glomerulus. Once it's been filtered out, and you found those liquids stay in the pipe already. Those liquids, we call them lumen. And the head part is called the Broman's capsule. So once those liquids come out of the plasma, it goes to the Broman's capsule, we call them lumen. Sounds familiar? Yes, lumen, L-U-M-E-N, lumen. We talk about that in unit 1. So the liquid stay in the small intestines, we call it lumen. And the liquid stay in the nephron, we also call it lumen because they are technically outside of the body. So if nothing happens, eventually there will be your body will get rid of them, either through the poop. The small intestines will go to the large intestines and go to the rectum and come out, or you'll pee them out. Like the lumens, it will go through the whole tube and eventually go to the bladder, pee them out. So that's a lumen. Lumen is outside the body. And the structures include the Broman's capsule, you have the proximal tubule, you have the descending loop, loop of Henle, ascending loop, distal tubule, collecting duct. So that's the journeys. And apparently a lot of events happens in this tube. So how do you take those molecules back? The molecular mechanism is actually what you learned in unit 1. So those active transport, facilitated diffusion, move sodiums, active transport, primary active transport, sodium potassium pump, secondary active transport, the glucose sodium importers, all these are used here to move those molecules back. So you found this class, they're all integrated together. Just for teaching, we have to divide them into unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, but actually all the knowledge, you need to use those knowledge all together. Okay, let's take a 4 minutes break. Come back at 41. As I said on the first day of the class, the curving will be done after all the exams been taken, exam 5, the optional exam been taken, all the quiz been taken, and then I will look at the class average. So the class average, if it's lower than a B, 82.6, then I'll curve it up to a B. So I want the class average to be a B, and it's curved based on each class. So you don't have to compare yourself with the 8 a.m. class, with the 9:30 class. You just compare yourself with the whole class, because each class, the exam question is different. So sometimes I just make the exams a little bit harder than the other. So that would be fair within the class. And there's no perfect way to make it absolutely fair for the whole 3-class 500 students. So that's what I do, just compare within this class. And your goal is stay on the top 1/3 of the class. So based on the average. And my experience is in the past few semesters, I don't curve too much. So I've been teaching at UT for about 5 years. One semester I curve like 4 points. And a few semesters I don't have to curve anything. It's like I gradually know like where I supposed to aim at, make the exams not overwhelmed, but not too easy. So students are willing to put effort into the materials. Like last semester's 3 classes, 2 classes I don't have to curve at all. And 1 class I curve like 0.2. So if you want to know your grade, you can look at the class average, but it won't be absolutely accurate because we just don't know how many students take the final. And the final grade will always be lower because the A student don't need to take the final. So the final average will be lower. And after the finals, not final, exam 5 is done, and then drop below is 1, look at the class average, then you know how much I can curve. And if you want to estimate your grade, the safest way to do is consider there's no curve, because there is a possibility that I won't curve if the class average is higher than a B. Yeah. So you have to assume I won't curve, and that's your average. So if your grade is way too lower than you expected, the curving probably won't do too much to help you, because it's a Gaussian distribution. But the class average will always be a B, because I limit. Like more students will be the B, B plus, B minus, like 66.7% will stay in that distribution, and a little bit higher, a little bit lower. So, and I always have 10% students who hate me. I'm used to it. It's like the price I pay to teach those high upper division difficult classes. So I do my job. I teach you what you're supposed to learn to excel in your future health field. So that's about the curving. Okay, let's go back to this. So we talk about the nephron structure. Now let's add some color to it. So from here to here, the 80% of them is labeled as purple, means they don't need to consider what's your body conditions. They are non-regulated. That's how the textbook put it, non-regulated. It's like they don't have to ask, okay, what's your body osmolarity? Then should I take the sodium? Should I take the water back? The first 80% of them, the answer will always be yes, take them back. It's like you should not ask your professor, should I know this? Should I know that? The answer will always be yes, you need to know this. Because they need to take over 99% of the liquid back. So the first 80% of them, they don't even bother to ask, okay, should I do the reabsorption? The answer will always be yes. And you say, well, okay, well, sometimes my pee is very concentrated, sometimes it's very diluted. Yes, that's the last 20% of them. The end part of the descending loop and mainly the collecting duct. This is the area they regulate. So they have to ask the body, hey, what's your osmolarity now? Should I take more or I take less water back? That's this part, the last 20% part. A little bit descending loop and mainly collecting duct. So based on your body osmolarity, they will take more and less water back. And you found the last 20%, that's good enough. That's good enough. So your urine can be very concentrated, very diluted. It's all based on this 20%. And it's regulated by the hormone. You learned that in unit 1, the hormone from the posterior pituitary gland, ADH, antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin. There's a hormone regulate this part, the last 20% of the tube, to regulate water reabsorption. So this one, they just add the cortex and medulla. So this loop, they go to the medulla. This is called the loop of Candy. He's the person who found it, Candy. And you will go to the medulla. And next week, next class, we'll talk more about the environment in the medulla. It becomes more and more concentrated. So these help the water to take back. So a lot of reabsorption happen in all this 80% of tube, especially the loop of Henle part. So after the loop of Henle, the environment in the lumen is not like blood anymore. In the beginning part, the lumen is very similar to the blood because it directly comes from blood. So now let's look at the process. There are 4 processes happens in the nephron. The first one is called filtration. So the blood comes from the afferent arteriole, go to the glomerulus. Glomerulus is like a balloon, and capillary is leaky area. So once you put water into the balloon, okay, hydrostatic pressure can push the plasma out. So that process is called filtration. And when you do your annual health check, the GFR, glomerular filtration rate, that's this. That's this. So if your glomerular filtration rate is pretty good, the number close to 180 per day, well, that means most of your nephrons still functioning and you have very good kidney. If it drops to be too low, well, that's bad. So that's the filtration. That's the filtration. And after it's been filtered, we assume if nothing happens, okay, this tube, if nothing happens, that these molecules, after they've been filtered, they will go through the proximal tubule, loop of Henle, distal tubule, collecting duct, and come out. You can collect them in the bladder. That process is called the excretion. So excretion is get them out of the system. Go to the bladder, that's excretion. So if this molecule is not being handled in the kidney, always say it's handled neither reabsorbed nor secreted. Sounds complicated, but just say they are not handled here. How much being filtered in equal to how much you get in the excretion. So the filtration will equal to the excretion. Right? And they will be great because we can calculate the filtration based on that molecules. We can take the blood sample. We know that molecules concentration in the blood. We don't know the GFR because we want to know the GFR to know your kidney function. But we know the concentration of that molecule in your urine. And we also know your urine flow because based on your body weight, we can estimate what's your urine flow. Most people have 1.2 to 1.6 liters of urine per day. We know that. And all we don't know is the GFR. So if we can find the molecules, the kidneys don't handle them. It's neither reabsorbed nor secreted. How much being filtered in here equal to how much being excreted here. Then we can calculate back the GFR. And we did find those molecules. Inulin, creatinine, these 2 molecules. Inulin is a little bit better than inulin and then creatinine, but both of them works. Your body handle them neither reabsorbed nor secreted. How much being filtered in, how much being excreted. And we have the urine flow, and we have the urine concentration, and we have the blood concentration, which calculate back what's the GFR. So in your discussion exercise this week, it's all about the renal calculation. It scares a lot of students, but the concept is actually pretty straightforward. The first concept will always figure out the GFR. We use inulin, creatinine, because these are the molecules neither reabsorbed nor secreted. If they filtered in 100 inulin per minute, and we expect to receive 100 inulin per minute in the urine. It's like you dump 100 marbles in, you just, well, collect here, you will collect 100. So that's the first step. Always figure out the GFR. That's a filtration and excretion. But you say, okay, well, I dump in 100 marbles. I'm very excited. I collect the urine. I find nothing. What happens? 100 back. You got nothing because 100 marbles been taken back. Reabsorption. You can have reabsorption. So some molecules, your body handle them like net reabsorption. You dump in 100, you found you only get 20 from the urine. That's reabsorption because you take 80 back. Or you dump in 100, you get nothing in the urine, 100 of them taken back. That's reabsorption. And the example is glucose. So all of you, you're healthy persons, you have blood sugar. Your blood sugar won't be 0. Your blood sugar is part of the homeostasis. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower. But your body have insulin, glucagon, these 2 hormones to regulate your blood sugar level. So it won't drop to 0. Before it drops to 0, you fall into coma. Your blood needs blood sugar. Your brain needs blood sugar. So it's maintained. And you have blood sugar will be filtered in. Too bad, it's a molecule too small, it will be filtered in. And once it's been filtered in, well, it will go through this tube. And eventually you have glucose in the urine. No, most of us, we don't. So it means all the glucose will be taken back. You filter in 100 glucose per minute, you get nothing in the urine because 100 glucose will be taken back per minute. That's reabsorption. And why the diabetes patients have to watch their blood sugar level? They have to punch their finger every meal, not every day, every meal. They have to look at the blood sugar level because they could not make the blood sugar go too high. then too much sugar will be filtered into the kidney. And when too much sugar filtered into the kidney function is not so well already. So they just could not take all the sugar back. Some of them will show up in the urine. And that's how people identified diabetes 100 years ago. They found, oh, this person's urine is sweet. And that's not a good sign. So you pee sugar, that's not good. And it's diabetes. And when you have the sugar in the urine, it will trap water because water will go to dilute it. So diabetes patients pee a lot. When they pee a lot, they feel thirsty, they drink a lot. And also the sugar being pee away, their body are hungry, they eat a lot and make the situation worse and worse. It's like a bad cycle, keep going down. And when you give their kidney so much work to do, eventually the kidney fail. When the kidney fails, they need to do dialysis. And eventually they need a kidney transplant. So that's diabetes. So reabsorption. And you're healthy, so you filter 100 glucose in, 100 will be taken back. You filter in 200 glucose, 200 will be taken back. You say, okay, I go to eat buffet. I filter in 1,000 glucose in. No, your body won't let it happen because your body cannot release insulin to lower your blood sugar level. And if your body becomes insensitive to insulin, yes, that's what happens. And that's diabetes. Diabetes 1 is their body don't have insulin. Diabetes 2 is their body is insensitive to insulin. Well, then they have to watch the blood sugar. So that's a reabsorption. So in a renal calculation, after you use inulin and creatinine to calculate the GFR, then I give you glucose or other molecules similar to glucose. And you can calculate, okay, when you filter it in, if you get nothing, we know the reabsorption rate because that's how much being taken back, how much filter in equal to how much being taken back. Or you just take the filtration, subtract out excretion, that's how much being taken back. So we talk about 3 processes here: filtration, reabsorption, excretion. Then what's the last one? The last one is called the secretion. What's secretion? Secretion is you dump this molecule from the blood to this pipe. Say you filter in 100 marbles and you got very excited, you wait in the bladder, you found, oh, I got 200 here. There's no way you get 200 in because the filtration rate is constant. We want this to be constant. The GFR is constant. You only filtered in 100 marbles per minute. Why you get 200 marbles in your urine per minute? Because you dump in another 100. You manually do it. That's secretion. Like your body handle the hydrogens. Secretion. People with acidosis, their body have too much hydrogens. Okay, the filtration rate is constant. They can only handle 100 hydrogens ions in the blood. So in this part, they will dump in another 100 hydrogens in the distal tubule and collecting duct. So eventually in the bladder, you have 200 hydrogens per minute. So people with lung disease, prebiotic lung disease, lung edema, their urine is very acidic because if they don't, their body becomes acidosis. Just quickly get rid of the hydrogen. So when you take their blood sample, even though those people have lung disease, amazingly, their blood pH is still 7.4, still homeostasis, because the kidney can work a lot. Hydrogen is one. The second example is penicillin. Penicillin is net secretion. We call it net because there's very difficult to know what happens around here. We can only know the net effect. So you filtered in 100 penicillin, you get 200 in the urine per minute. Why? Because you dump another 100 penicillins in here. Like it's like, well, we don't know why. The kidney just don't like penicillin. So it's net secretion. So during the World War II, a lot of soldiers, well, they got wounded, and the doctor actually have to recycle those soldiers' urine to recycle the penicillin because they're short of penicillin. So these are the 4 processes. And when we put all these 4 together, what's this? It's actually not too difficult. How much filtered in, subtract out, they've been reabsorbed back, plus how much been adding back, secretion equal to excretion. So the concept of this equation is actually not difficult at all. It's when we add all the other calculations, how to calculate the filtrations, how to calculate reabsorptions, well, students start to freak out. But the concept is like this. How much you dump in here, if nothing happens, how much you collect in the end of tube. And we love those molecules. So in the renal calculation, the discussion exercise this week, the first thing will always be figure out the GFR. Because this is what we don't know. We know the excretion. We just give these patients, hey, a bucket, say, pee in it. And tomorrow I will come back like that. We know how much urine per day. We just scoop a small urine, we take the urine concentration, and we multiply this together. That's the excretion rate. We know how much urine per 24 hours being produced, and we know how many marbles you have in per liter of urine. We multiply them together. That's how many marbles you get. And we know how many marbles you have in the blood. We just take the blood sample. And the only thing we don't know is this filtration rate. So we can calculate back this. That's why we like to use inulin to calculate the GFR. And once you have GFR, depends on the molecule. Because the first question I ask you to calculate the GFR. The second one is, okay, I have a molecule. Either I tell you this glucose or anything similar to glucose. I dump in 100 marbles. How come I got 0? Because those 100 marbles being reabsorbed back. Then I ask, what's the reabsorption rate? That's those 100 marble per minute. That's the reabsorption rate, because how much dump in 100 marble per minute, and the reabsorption is exactly the same. That's why you got 0. And if you got 10 in the equation, well, that's easy. 100 subtract 10, that's 90 per minute. That's the reabsorption rate. That happen in the diabetes patient. They take some back, they still have some here. Then the third question, I ask you an unknown molecule, maybe penicillin, or I tell you the unknown molecule similar to penicillin. I dump in 100 marbles per minute. How come I got 200 marbles here? What's the secretion rate? 200 in, 100 in, you got 200. You dump in 100 marbles per minute. That's the secretion. So you found, well, this is actually pretty straightforward. But when we start to look at the math, we freak you out. But the concept is actually this, pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's look at the first one, filtration. The filtration happens from the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. That's filtration. And filtration is non-selective. They could not put the membrane protein, they could not put the sodium channels, sodium glucose importer on the Bowman's capsule, say, hey, take these molecules in, don't take that in. No, it takes too long. Because your kidney filter 180 liters of blood per day. They don't have time to make it selective, so it's non-selective. It's non-selective, they just create a slit. If the molecule is too big, it won't be able to go through, then it won't go to the kidney. If the molecule is too small, it will go through. If it is important molecule, okay, let's figure out a way to take them back. That's reabsorption. So the glucose, sodium, water, they all been filtered in. Then you use the membrane protein to take those sodium back, glucose back, water back. And the filtration part is non-selective. So let's look at those slits. You found, okay, that's the glomerulus, and outside you put these called the podocyte cells. That's the main one, create the slit. And let's cut it open. When you cut it open, you look like this. And let's zoom in, look at this part. So the slit, 3 layers. The first one, the capillary, that's the endotheliums. Because capillary is a leaky place, but you still have 1 layer of cells. So this creates slit size. The second one, that's the podocyte cells. Podocyte cells, its job is like the pore. Like when you drive to the capital and you found some road, they have those pore blockage. Actually, we have one at the UT outside, we have those pore. And your car is like a red blood cell. You know, you could not drive through because your car is too big. And those pore are the podocyte cells. So the capillary endotheliums and the podocyte cells, 2 layers. The third layer is between them, this blue one. The blue one is called the basal lamella. It's like a membrane there. So this structure. The basal lamella, it looks like a membrane, but it has negative charge, and most protein have negative charge, so it can prevent the protein to move in. You still have a little bit protein in your urine, but not too much. Most protein be pushed here. And those big cells, like red blood cells, there's no way to go through this in normal situation. So the only way to go through this is you damage this pore. Like when you drive to the capital and you say, oh, those pore block my car. And you get angry, you take a big hammer, you hammer out those pores. Now your car can drive through. So you physically damage this, like your kidney being punched. There's those boxer, punch those kidney. When you punch those big kidney, you physically damage this. Now the blood can go through. It's like your car can drive through those pores. And when the red blood cell goes through, you have no mechanism to take red blood cell back because they're not supposed to be there. You cannot use the membrane protein to take a red blood cell back. Red blood cell is too big. You cannot transport them back. So those red blood cells will go through this. You'll go through the whole tube, eventually go to the bladder, you pee blood out, then you freak out. You say something's wrong. Something's definitely wrong. You're not supposed to have the blood in the urine. Or infection. Some people have kidney infection. You damage this, but it can cause the blood show up. So both of them tell you something's wrong. Either your pee is red or the pee is black. Those red blood cells being oxidated. You can have the red pee, you can have the black pee. And both of them freak you out. It's not normal. Okay, so that's the filtration state. The last 5 minutes, let's look at the driving force. So we look at the slit. We know most molecules can go through if they are small enough. So actually, all the small molecules you find in the blood will go through. That's why those Olympic athletes have to take the urine sample. Because those drugs they take to enhance their muscle performance, they're in the blood, they will be filtered in, and they will show up in the urine. They just take the urine sample. They found, oh, all the drugs they take in the body. And the only way to get away from it is blood doping. So we talk about the blood doping before. Self-inject EPO. EPO is the hormones. And the hormones is the one with very low concentration, have a big power. And the hormones, that's your body hormone. So it's very difficult to find blood doping. You have to take the blood sample and have a very stable baseline to identify the blood doping. But the other drugs, those athletes take, will show up in the urine because this process is non-selective. And the driving force, the main one is the hydrostatic pressure. So the blood come from the afferent arteriole, will go to the glomerulus. It's like you put water into the balloon. And once the balloon becomes big, that's the hydrostatic pressure. That's the pressure push the liquid or the molecules inside out, about 55 millimeter mercury. And there are two forces that are against the filtration. The first one is the fluid hydrostatic pressure in the bromance capsule. You filter the blood out. Once you have liquid here, you have another balloon, you have a hydrostatic pressure. So that pressure, about 15 millimeter mercury, is against filtration. The third one, still against filtration, is called osmotic pressure. So this pressure, that's after you filter those small molecules out, because filtration is non-selective. Every molecule smaller than the slit will be filtered in, but those big molecules, those proteins, will stay on the it will stay in the glomerulus. Now it creates osmotic pressure, try to suck the water back. So it's still against filtration. And then you take 55 millimeter mercury. That's the 4 filtration. You subtract out these 2 against filtration 1. Subtract out 30, subtract out 15, you have 10 millimeter mercury. Not a very high pressure, but this 10 millimeter mercury provide a consistent pushing force for filtering your blood. So your GFR is created by this. You have a very consistent pushing force, and you want this to be consistent. You don't want this to vary a lot. If this varies a lot, you damage the filter. So you want this to be very consistent. Now here comes the problem. Because the hydrostatic pressure depends on the blood flow from the afferent arteriole to the glomerulus. And that blood flow depends on your blood pressure come from your aorta. And we know the blood pressure is not consistent, even though you have the barrel reflex, try to maintain your blood pressure, but it's still a range. Your blood pressure won't drop to 0 until you die, but you still have a range. So when you exercise, when you get angry, when you're fighting the bear, your blood pressure increases because the sympathetic system get activated. And when you're resting, you're enjoying your meal, you're reading, you're sleeping, your blood pressure go lower. And your body have a wiggle room for the blood pressure. And you say every time the blood pressure change, then these filtrations won't be constant. That's not good. You want this filter to last for 80, 90 years. So we need to have a feedback loop to cancel out the blood pressure change. Still maintain the GFR very consistent. So next time we'll talk about how to maintain the GFR constant. Your body is actually very good at doing that. As long as the blood pressure stays between the 80 to 180 millimeter mercury, your GFR is very constant.